Welcome back to another episode here on Homeskape YouTube. We're going to talk today about the termination of covenants. In the last video, we talked about what is a real covenant. In this video, we're going to talk about how to end that. How do those covenants terminate? So just to review really quick, I always got my notes here with me. A real covenant is a promise that concerns the use of land. We talked about how there's an affirmative covenant and a negative covenant, meaning this affirmative means it's a promise to do something, and a negative covenant is a promise not to do something. So how does a covenant end? A covenant ends, there's 6 ways a covenant ends. I have them here for you. Number 1, terms stated in the covenant. So if there was a warranty deed or a land contract or a land lease that had a covenant in it, and there's terms in that contract, in that document, that state how a covenant can be released or terminated, then that's one of the ways. So the first thing you want to do is check for terms in the actual agreement, the deed, the lease, the bylaws of an association, and see how the covenant is written and if there's a termination clause for them. Second is a written release. That means when this covenant was created by someone, right? So it was usually the original landowner or the person who started the home association or condo association has covenants in there. That covenant can be terminated by a written release from the person or the entity that created it. Number 3, by merger or burdened estates and benefited estates. What does this mean? So, for example, I own 100 acres. I divvy off 6 acres to my cousin, but I give him a real covenant that says the house must look very similar to the house that I have built, so we can keep a good aesthetic feel in the neighborhood. So if I have red shutters, you have to have red shutters, right? That's the covenant. That's what I make him do within the contract that I give him. Now, if I buy back that property was the burdened estate. Mine was the benefited estate. When I buy it back, there's a thing called merger. That merger dissolves or terminates that covenant. So there's no longer a need for me to rely on that covenant if I actually buy it. And vice versa. If he bought my estate, now that covenant doesn't run with him because he's the one who owns the entire estate. The estate merges, and the burdened estate and the benefited estate of the covenant is now terminated. There's a termination of that covenant because there's merger of those 2 estates. So that's number 3. Number 4, condemnation of a burdened estate. I actually looked this up, so give me a second here for you. Condemnation occurs when a local, state, or federal government seizes private property and compensates the owner. Okay, so this is when the government takes the property. And when the government takes the property, guess what? They can do what they want. Exactly. So termination of the covenant happens when there's condemnation of a burdened estate. Number 5, abandonment. This is when people stop caring about the covenant. So if I release, if I have 100 acres and I sell 5 5-acre parcels, so 25 acres to 5 different people, and I say you guys can only grow corn, I'm only growing corn on mine. Next week I stop growing corn. They stop growing corn. They start growing apple trees, orange trees. I don't say anything. I start growing other things. The time passes. We've abandoned the real covenant, right? No one really cares about it. So, and then 6, change circumstances. So there's a situation where if there's a radical change in circumstances, you're gonna be able to abandon the real covenant. So if the real covenant, for example, says you can only use this land for growing walnuts, and all of a sudden the land is not suitable for growing walnuts for one reason or another, that may be enough of a radical change for it for there to be a termination of the covenant. Okay. Likewise, if you have a piece of land that got flooded and you turn it into a lake, right? If this is has to be a radical change. That covenant's going to end because you obviously can't use the land for the purposes that the covenant may have stated. So those are 6 ways that you can terminate a covenant, or that a covenant can be terminated. I'll repeat them for you really quick. Number 1, if they're stated in the covenant. Number 2, if there's a written release by the person who or the entity who put together the covenant. Number 3, by merger of burdened estate and benefited estate. That means there was 2 estates. Remember, one of them got separated, and that's when the covenant was created. If they go back together, if they're merged again by one owner buying the other property, that's a termination of the covenant. Number 4, condemnation of a burdened estate. Number 5, abandonment. And number 6, change circumstances, that have radical changes, will terminate the covenant. Hope you thought this was useful. Subscribe to the page, like it, share it, and come back for more. We'll talk soon, guys. Thanks for joining us.